It's 11 o'clock. I guess we'll make a start on today's Bible talk. I guess during the week we've all learnt perhaps a little bit more about the Bible, the Welsh Bible in particular, thanks to John and the preaching committee. And we've also, in the talks throughout the week, learnt a little bit more about what the Bible says. Knowledge is a marvelous thing, but useless if we do nothing with it. Hence the title of this address this morning, What Shall I Do with Jesus? Learned a little bit more about him, but what do I do with him? In the Gospel record of Mark, Pontius Pilate asked the mob on the balcony below. Now, I've been told that I've only got to press 2 buttons, so I can't go wrong. Pontius Pilate on the balcony below, addressed the mob below and said, "What shall I do with the one you call the King of the Jews?" "Crucify him," they shouted. And Pilate replied, "What crime has he committed?" This, by way of background, is an oil painting. It's in a gallery in Florence. It's by Antonio Cesari, and it was commissioned by the Italian government in about 1870. And I'd love to see it in real life, but it's entitled Ecce Homo, Behold the Man, Latin, Ecce Homo. Quite a famous oil painting. And about 50 years ago, a bronze ring was found in Herodian, and that was a city built by Herod the Great around 20 BC. And the ring's name, now you can just about make it out, but the ring's name bears the title Pilatus, or Pilate. And it was Pilate who was the Roman governor between AD 26 and 36. And he was appointed governor of Judea by Tiberius Caesar. And just make out the Pilate on the side, which means skilled with the arrow or skilled with the javelin. Pontus means he came from the Pontus family, mid-Italy. And Pilatus is an expert with the javelin or with the spear. And he may have enjoyed a glass of wine because in the middle he got a goblet of wine. But anyway. I went wrong. I went up and set it down. And also, Pilate's name has been found on a stone plaque that commemorated the construction of a temple for the worship of Tiberius Caesar. This is a time when the Roman citizens deified their emperors. They made them gods. And Pilate built a temple to Tiberius, and his name is on this stone, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. It was found at Caesarea Maritima. In other words, Pilate existed. It's a historical fact. Now, it was before Pontius Pilate that Jesus of Nazareth appeared for the judgment that led to his death by crucifixion. And the encounter is recorded for us in all four of the gospel records, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and each gospel writer adds a little different dimension to what I think is an absolutely fascinating and challenging encounter. On a personal basis, I think the contact and the conversation that takes place between Christ and Pilate in the judgment hall and the events around it are for me, perhaps a silly thing to say, but the most fascinating. What else do we know about Pontius Pilate? Well, we know very little, actually. If it hadn't been for his contact with Christ, his name would probably have never entered into our minds. But we know he was an accomplished politician to get close to the top, to Tiberius Caesar. And I think Caesar primarily saw in Pontius Pilate the toughness of a soldier who could bring some measure of control to one of the most turbulent places in the whole of the Roman Empire, namely the region of Judea. And I think Pilate was a canny politician and a hard, seasoned soldier. And his ruthlessness is seen in an incident in which he orders the blood of certain individuals from Galilee to be mixed with the blood of their sacrifices. So they brought sacrifices to worship in the temple. For some reason, and history doesn't tell us, Pilate kills them, mixes their blood with the blood of the animals that they were going to sacrifice. It says in Luke chapter 13, verse 1, there were present at that season some that told Jesus of the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. Now that takes a bit of doing, but not in Roman days. They were utterly ruthless. And other writings paint the picture that Pontius Pilate was a hard, even cruel man who would do whatever was needed to get things done. A man with whom you didn't mess. A man who loved Rome and all that it stood for. He loved the empire, would die for it and fight for it without thought of his own life. A man who I think despised Judea and all the religious fervor that fermented within the regions. Even had a reputation for antagonizing Jews. He was the only governor to print coins that had to be used every day for transactions, buying a loaf of bread or a jug of wine. But on those coins were printed pagan images that he knew would cause offense to the religious leaders of the day. But he went and did it, perhaps with a smile on his face. So let's be clear, Pilate represented Roman authority when John the Baptist was preaching and preparing the way for Jesus, whose ministry lasted 3 years, thereabouts. And he was also in charge in the early days of the spread of Christianity throughout the Roman world, before he was summoned back to Rome in AD 36, and thereafter we know nothing of him. And it was to Pilate that the chief priests brought Jesus of Nazareth very early in the morning of a very, very busy Jerusalem, preparing for the high Passover. I'm going to go to John's Gospel record. You can come there if you want to, but you can also just listen to the narrative. This is what we find in John chapter 18. Then the chief priests and the rulers led Jesus from Caiaphas, who was the high priest, unto the hall of judgment. And it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled. What that is saying is that it was not practice for a Jew to enter into a Gentile's house or synagogue. They would be regarded as unclean, and if you're unclean, you can't attend the Passover. So they went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, if he were not a criminal, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. Then Pilate said unto them, Take ye him, you take him, and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto Pilate, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. And that, again, is compatible with history. The Jews were not allowed to put any man to death. That was the sole responsibility of the governor. There were things they could and could not do according to law, but if it was the death sentence, it was Roman tradition that that individual was tried fairly and properly if the death sentence was planned. But what hypocrisy, isn't it? They were bringing a man who had done nothing but good in his life to the Roman Empire on charges supported by false witnesses, when we look at the record, who couldn't agree. And yet they sought the death penalty on this man called Jesus of Nazareth. But they themselves wouldn't enter into the judgment hall of a Gentile, lest they be ceremonially defiled and unable to celebrate the Passover. It's astonishing, isn't it? It's gross hypocrisy. I'll take a man's life, but I won't dirty myself ceremonially. And in my mind's eye, I see Pilate, an angry man, rushing past Jesus on the side, going straight at those Jewish leaders. But it is the mention of the death penalty that drives Pilate into a face-to-face confrontation with Jesus. And the first bout of questioning begins. Verse 33. Then Pilate entered again the judgment hall and said to Jesus, Art thou the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself? Or did others tell it thee of me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Notice how Jesus is dismissing the third person. You know, did the scribes and the Pharisees tell you, what do you think, Pilate? What do you think he's saying in between those lines? Am I a Jew? I'm not a Jew. and a Roman. How would I know? And yet, I'm sure Pilate knew a lot, because Jesus was famous. He was huge. Multitudes followed him everywhere. And Pilate had been governor for 3 years. But note what Jesus is saying, first of all. His kingdom was not a material one based upon men's policies and politics, men's conflicts and ambitions, but a spiritual one, a heavenly one, founded on divine principles. And becoming part of this movement, this was voluntary, wasn't compulsory, no arms involved, it's of no threat to Rome. But at the mention of being a king and a kingdom, Pilate then asks in verse 37, Pilate therefore said unto Jesus, art thou a king then? When Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world, art thou a king then? And Jesus answered, thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. Jesus confirms that he's king of a kingdom based on truth. To which Pilate cynically replies, what is truth? Pilate said unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said unto them, I find in him no fault at all. And when we look at John 18 and 19, Pilate says, I find no fault in him at all. I find no fault in him. I find no fault in him. He says it 3 times. I find no fault in him. And so, he should have been released by Jesus and set free. Should he not? But Pilate sets about humiliating and debasing Jesus. Why? Well, I think to prove that he was no king, had no power. He was just another man. John chapter 19, Pilate therefore took Jesus, scourged him. And the soldiers plaited a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they smote him with their hands. Pilate therefore went forth again and saith unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that he may know that I find no fault in him. Then came Jesus forth wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate saith unto them, Ecce homo. Behold, the man. When the chief priests, therefore, and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Take ye him, crucify him. I find no fault in him. And I don't think we should read these words without keeping in the back of our mind the words we read yesterday, taken from Isaiah. He is despised and rejected of man, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not, thought nothing of him. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. That prophecy of Isaiah is hundreds of years old before this scene occurs, and was perhaps one of the most moving chapters in the whole of the Bible. The rulers of the Jews were not easily deflected from their goal. The Jews answered Pilate and said, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God." Oh, now that touched a nerve in Pilate. The Son of God. Now the Romans were devoted to their gods, and they had no desire whatsoever to offend the gods. And note, this hard and experienced and ruthless man is described as being, verse 8, when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. Now that's a startling sentence, isn't it? He was the more afraid. The more afraid, I think, because in Matthew's gospel record, Pilate's wife had sent him a little note saying, "Have nothing to do with this just and innocent man. For I have suffered many things in a dream because of him." Oh, always unsettling, isn't it, when your wife gets involved, which she probably never ever did before, and instinctively knowing that she's right. And I think it counts entirely for his desire to absolve all responsibility for harming a man in whom he finds no fault, and offloading that responsibility into the men who want him dead. So a very unsettled Pilate takes Jesus back into the judgment hall for further questioning. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, that he was the Son of God, he was the more afraid, and went into the judgment hall and said unto Jesus, "Whence art thou? Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Then said Pilate unto him, "Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee?" No doubt where the power lay. Jesus answered, "Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin." And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release Jesus, but the Jews cried out, saying, "If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar." Note, Pilate wanted to release Jesus, and when those clever, crafty, politically astute priests and rulers said, "If thou release this man, thou art not Caesar's friend, your boss, the man who determines the rest of your future politically, militarily." Pilate didn't do the right thing, did he? He wanted to release him, and release him he could, but he didn't. And when Pilate heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said unto the Jews, "Behold, your king." But they cried out, away with him, crucify him." And Pilate saith unto them, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then delivered Pilate him therefore unto them to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. And we know full well what happened next. Now, the fascinating thing about this encounter for me is that two paths open up in front of Pilate, don't they? One which is right and just, and one which he actually wants to do and follow. And another path which was expedient, advantageous, attaining the best outcome of a difficult situation, which I'm sure we've all been in. What I do for the best in this situation. Well, we finally come to the personal question. What do I do with Jesus? What do I do with him? Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, the Son of God. What do I do with that knowledge? Do I crucify him or do I crown him? A judgment needs to be made. It's what I find fascinating. You see, you cannot sit on the fence. You cannot hold the middle ground. In fact, I'd go so far as to say the middle ground is possibly the worst place to be. I'm just going to read you a short extract, conscious of the time, of the middle ground. Commentators made the point that Pilate, in their eyes, lacked both the courage to be good and the boldness to be bad. Goodness would have saved Jesus. Badness would have sent him straight to the cross. But vacillation, the middle ground, led to the protracted torture of multiple interrogations, mockings, and scourgings. They led to the unnecessary reed and the crown of thorns. The middle ground is sometimes the worst place to be. Pilate could simply have released Jesus and signed his death warrant. He rather took the middle ground in the hope that perhaps they would feel sorry for him, seeing he was committing some sort of justice. But in the end, he washed his hands of it all and did a most shameful thing for a Roman. He left the decision to the mob. Now, what a governor. What a man. He despised the mob, but it was the mob and the Jews who made the decision for him. A decision, I think, always needs to be made with Jesus of Nazareth, because the outcome of the decision is important for you and me. It's a matter of life or death, not for Jesus, but for you and me. Very quickly, 3 verses I want to read to you. One is from John chapter 11, which says this. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. Living in Jesus means crowning him and keeping his commandments. On another occasion, in the 15th chapter, Jesus said, if ye keep my commandments, ye shall live in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and live in his love. If you want life and love, you have to crown Jesus and not crucify him or occupy the middle ground where the mob rules. Well, you make the judgment based upon the evidence you consider to be the truth. One last teaching of Jesus of Nazareth. It's in the 8th chapter. The King of the Jews, which was written in Aramaic, Latin, Greek, and thank God in Welsh and English. We can read something from the 8th chapter that says, then Jesus said to those Jews which believed on him, if ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. And if ye continue in my word, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So I appreciate I've gone on longer than I should have, but thank you for your attention.